So, ladies and gentlemen, a man I've got to know pretty well over the last 2 days. We're really honoured to have John Twist from nearly Canada.
Nearly Canada.
Nearly Canada in America. John has become the US guru, and this is going to be really his life in MG, and particularly University Motors at Fairmile. John Twist.
Thank you. I may end up having to sit down, but I'll speak up so you can hear, so I can click through this, unless by some faint chance this actually clicks and works. Okay, so I'm an American. I can't even tell you when my ancestors came to the United States. It was a long time ago. My most recent immigrants were to the United States were in the 1850s from Germany. So my family's been there longer, so I'm American, you know. So, but here I am because why not, you know? I decided that I would become an MG mechanic. This is November 1971, and so it's a story of passion, patience, and perseverance. So our whole family are Anglophiles. My grandfather came to London in 1910 with his brother to set up a branch office of the Brooks Rupture Appliance Company. A quarter of the male population was ruptured had a hernia at the turn of the last century, and they had a product that was like dynamite, and they sold it. It was tremendous. He lived here for 2 years. Came home in 1912. Cousin Brooksy said, "Grandpa, you always traveled first class. You always were on the new and improved side. Why don't you take the Titanic home?" That came home in the spring of 1912. And he said, "Oh, I always traveled canard." So my father spent some time in England. He was stationed at Tidworth Barracks. They all had girlfriends, wild times. And he's the guy, he's the good-looking guy on the right. My mother was here for a short time in 1947, and this isn't my first foray into British recognition. This Punch magazine from 1958 carries this little tiny picture of me in the bottom left in 4th grade at Sherman School, drawn by Norman Mansbridge, who was a family friend and cartoonist for Punch. In the same magazine, here's an advertisement for London Stratton House, touting the Magnet. So, in 1962, that was my first trip to the United States with the Boy Scouts, underwritten by the Gillette Razor Blade Company. I felt guilty for years because I had a beard. My late wife never saw me without a beard, and I still don't use Gillette products. But so I'm the kid in the front row, just above the blue arrow. We were here for a month. My good friend in my hometown of Marshall, Michigan, the dad bought the kids and the family in 1964, bought them a 1957 MGA. So we drove over to Jack Darling's shop one summer day in 1965 to get the carburetors adjusted, something no mortal could do. And Jack yelled at my buddy and said, "I told you I can't adjust those, they need to be rebuilt." Well, how much is that going to cost? $27. Well, it might as well have been $1 million. We couldn't afford it, so we drove away. But in the corner of that shop, I spied a TD. I'm not a car guy. I'm not a car guy. I'm not interested in cars. I am interested in MGs, and I saw that TD and fell instantly in love. So I decided that I was going to buy that TD, but then that opportunity passed. But I bought my first MG in Elyria, Ohio, in the spring of 1968, and I put down a list of things that I thought you should do when you're buying a car. This works for buying a house or finding a spouse. Look at 6 before you buy one. Buy the best one you can possibly afford. Buy the one you want. If you want a red one with wire wheels, don't buy a blue one with disc wheels and think I'll change it. Avoid rust. Have it checked out before you buy it, and take your time. And those are still the rules that I give. If somebody calls up and says, "I'm looking for an MG," I said, follow these 6 rules. So I bought in that spring. I bought TD 28822 from Scotty Hazlett on Overlook Drive, Grafton, Ohio 44044. And I spent $1,050, which doesn't seem like a lot of money, but a brand new Ford Falcon at the time was $1,650, and a brand new Volkswagen was $1,699. So $1,000 is 2/3 of that. It turns out, it didn't seem like a lot of money to me at the time because I didn't have it. I had to borrow it from my father. But anyway, I did pay him back. So right after I got the car, I went in the Army. I was a clerk, chairborne, spent my time at Fort Knox, and then when I was sent to Vietnam, I was at Army headquarters. But while I was at Fort Knox, I met another guy who drove Packards. We'd go out together. Here I am with my TD, looking happy. Here junk food picnic, and at Bettner's Grocery, not too far away from Fort Knox. So drove that TD, had just a grand time with it. It was autumn red, 53. There it is. So in color, at Fort Knox with me in my Army outfit. So I discovered British tools then. I didn't even know British tools existed. There were tools in the toolbox that said like 21/64ths, and I thought, who would make a car with such odd measurements? And it turns out, oh my gosh, there's a whole world here. And then not only did that appeal to my sense of archaic craziness, but then there were these cross-sectional views inside the workshop manual. And this stuff is art. Look at this stuff. I was hoping at our tour up at Whitney yesterday that they'd say, oh yeah, we have all the originals of all these pictures, but look at these. These are marvelous artistic drawings, and you can look at every single thing. It all pops apart. Nothing like this in a modern workshop manual. Today all it says is don't drink the oil, warning, So I love this stuff. And the beautiful line drawings. You can see the cuticles and the lines in the guy's fingernails, and the stylized drops. Oil's not that thin. Shouldn't be that thin dropping out of there. Should be a smaller drop. The line drawings are just so tremendous. This stuff, it just appealed to me. Look at this stuff. And it's explained exactly how to do everything. And if you read the workshop manual, it tells you how to do it. It's not a big mystery. Just read the workshop manual. So I learned how an SU worked by looking at this diagram in the TD workshop manual, this black and white cross-sectional diagram, and reading 2 columns over and over and over, a line in my bunk at Fort Knox. And I got it. I understood how the SU worked. So in the Christmas of 1968, I drove home from Fort Knox. It was a brutally cold winter, and my Arnold heater down there, the fan worked, but all it did was jingle. Later on, when I took it apart, it was all sludged up. No water was going through it. But that was the coldest I've ever been in a car in my life, was driving home. So driving back down to Fort Knox, I think another time, I got just south of Indianapolis in Salem, Indiana, and all of a sudden there's this catastrophic bang, 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 bang from inside the engine. And I didn't know anything. I had nothing about engines. It was learning, but I knew nothing about engines. So I pull into a filling station where, surprise, surprise, there's a mechanic on duty who not only pumps gas but fixes cars. And it's about 10 o'clock at night. He's about ready to close up. And I said, well, can you just look at it? And he goes, all right. Well, and we move the bonnet back, and he says, well, let's take the valve cover off, get the valve cover off. And he says, well, start it up. I didn't even know you could do that. I didn't know you could start an engine with the valve cover off, And so he's... it's running, bang, 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 and he's leaning over the engine looking down at it, and he says, rev it up. Well, on an X-Pag, when you rev it up, there's a wall of oil that So he's drenched in hot oil. That was the end of his inspection. And a couple weeks later, I got a tow bar from Major Neck, who had a TF on post, and towed my car home. And I spent my entire year in Vietnam reading the original Moss Motors catalog. So in the Moss Motors catalog, just above the blue arrow, because Al Moss put all these parts on the floor and then stood over it and shot the picture and then labeled everything. And item number 60 is labeled as tow in picture by mistake. Well, when they redid the catalog, there's still, item 60 is still tow in picture by mistake. And it's listed down, you can't read it because it's too small, but it says quantity 10, you know. So. This is my favorite Moss Motors invoice. I mean, they were the only people in the States that were selling parts. So this invoice is dated the 11th of April, 1969, and I'd been reading through the catalog and I'd been reading through the workshop manual, and it said that there were 3 different cams available for the distributors, symmetric, asymmetric, and high lift. And I wrote to Moss and I said, of all these cams, which one are you selling? And they wrote back and said, sorry, no information available. But if you know how to spell all 3, you know more than we do. So, I mean, no one would, first of all, you wouldn't get a written response back from a company today anyway, but yeah, that's my favorite. So here I am as the chief clerk in operations, the 25th Infantry Division, and that was our base camp, the Electric Strawberry. I worked in one of those buildings down there. And this is my Rambo picture from Vietnam, from bunker guard. This is the picture that I sent back to my college, to the guy who was putting together the college yearbook with all the kids who'd stayed in college. I did, and I'd quit and joined the Army. And so that was my senior picture in the college yearbook. It was different. So I got out. I got out. Here I'm in California with about as many ribbons as George Patton, for the advantage of being a clerk. And so I immediately went home and took my TD apart. Right, I was going to restore it, and I made up a list. I can't find that list anymore, but I'd listed out everything I was going to do, how long it was going to take me, how much. It was a plan, and I figured it would take me about 6 weeks to restore the car. No one was there to tell me any differently, and I did take it all the way apart. For those of you who've got a TD, you can see that I'm down to steel chassis rails. The wood, every piece of wood I copied on a guy's bandsaw and formed and fabricated myself. It was a Herculean task. Herculean would be more correct, but General Schwarzkopf called it Herculean, and I figured he's smarter than I was. So I went back to Kalamazoo College in January '71, and immediately met Tom Lange, who's still in the MG trade. He graduated and became a antiquarian librarian at the Huntington Library in Los Angeles, and we formed up a little company called MG Series Specialists. At least some of that title was correct. This is my first invoice. My first invoice to Harold Heibels, which is the May 7th, 1971. For $363. So this is the first time I got paid for working on someone else's MG. Therefore, this is my date of my base pay entry date into the world of MGs. So there's Tom, a more recent picture. He's got all the T's, TAs, TBs, TC, TD, TF. Then after he went off to graduate school, I combined with another guy, and we called ourselves British Motor Service. We were in Kalamazoo, Michigan, didn't do a lot of business. And I quickly eclipsed everything that this other guy, Alan, knew. And here I am working on my same TD. This is a lot later, so I'm getting closer to getting it done. I'm the guy on the left of the picture there. And I was driving an MGA. This is the MGA that my good buddy John Begg had, that I first was introduced to MGs. And of course, when I put this up on my website, everybody in the United States who saw it was looking at the cars in the background going, "Oh, wow!" They don't care about the MGA, you know. So in November of 1971, all my friends were going off to grad school. Everybody's doing some, joining the Peace Corps. They were all doing something, and here I am. What am I going to do? And it's like the heavens parted and the Monty Python skit, you know, and God appears to me and says, kid, you're going to be the MG guy. So I decide, okay, all right, I'll get a job. I'll get a job and learn MGs. And I wanted to end up with an MG dealership. I mean, how could you find heaven on earth other than selling new MGs to people? I mean, oh my gosh. So I thought, well, I'll get experience in service, in parts, in sales, and then I'll get a dealership. So I started off in service. That's what I liked anyway. And I wrote to British Leyland and said, do you have training schools? And they said, only if you are in working at a dealership, and we have training schools. It was a lie, they didn't, but anyway, so I went to I drove north, an hour north of Kalamazoo to Grand Rapids, where I live now, and applied at the MG dealer, and he said, well, kid, you know, you got any experience? You ever worked at a gas station? I said, no, not likely to either. And he says, well, I'm not going to hire you. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? You know, I mean, here's this, I thought, you know, I'm going to come back after 6 months of working in England. I'll go to England and get a job, and I'll be standing next to a kid who said, yeah, I've been working at Don's Arco, Atlantic Richfield oil gas station for 6 months, and I'll say, well, I've been working in England for 6 months. I mean, help me out. Who's going to get the job? So it's like, get a job in England. Okay. So I came to England I had worked on a TC that belonged to the family that owned the Checker Motor Corporation. They made taxis. And on the side of the engine was a rebuild tag, University Motors Limited. And it just stuck in my head. The name stuck in my head. And so when I came to England, I thought, I'll look in the phone book. You know, and I open up the phone book, and there it is, University Motors, 567-6644, you know, and I called up, and I got Jimmy White on the other end of the phone eventually, and he said, yeah, sure, come on out and talk to us. So he said, sure, I'll hire you. So much correspondence. This is to Denzel Weber. A lot of correspondence back and forth, and immigration paperwork and so forth. And I say goodbye to my girlfriend, and I close on my shop, and I come to I flew Icelandic into Luxembourg City, and it took a day and a half to get to Dunkirk, and I'm all set to come into England. This is my favorite passport, Z107477, issued in Saigon. It's a real unusual passport. And there it is, on the 16th of June, I was refused entry to the United Kingdom. You know, everybody in front of me, everybody behind me, coming in 6 months, 6 months, 6 months. What do you get? Student, tourist, you know, friend, whatever. And they said, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I've got a job. And he said, well, where's your work permit? And I said, well, I thought it was a sort of a concept. And he says, no, mate, it's a piece of paper, you know. And so that I got put in this little lockup with another American and a Turk with a guitar. And the British attempt at conversing with foreigners is, if you only raise your voice, you can force the understanding into the brain cells. They're screaming at this poor Turk, who is obviously going to come in. And anyway, so. I hung out in Belgium and came back in. I don't think the other one's in there. I came back in about 10 days later. I'd worked in Belgium. I'd worked in Brussels, Belgium, in a supermarket a couple years before, right after high school, working bottle return, and just a crap job, but foreign job, speaking French the whole time. And so anyway, I got back into England on a 30-day visa. They wouldn't let me in for any longer than that, and you'd better not work. So I went to my grandfather's company, and started stuffing envelopes there to make enough money to be able to live. And I went to the Ministry of Labor and I said, "Hey, I'm here. I'm all set to work for 11 bob an hour, so I can go back to the United States and service MGs better, so you'll sell more of them." Well, that's very nice, but my God, if we let people come into the country before they had work permits, why the whole country would fill up with foreigners, So that was then. And I went to the Ministry of Trade and explained the situation. They said, "Well, it's very nice, but of course we don't give out work permits." So saved. Frank Redford from the Brooks Appliance Company was the treasurer of the Potters Bar Conservative Association, and they had an MP who was sitting. So Frank says, "Well, come on out Saturday. Our member of Parliament's having a surgery Saturday morning." I said, "Surgery? Well, you got let me tell you, even if you look in a British dictionary, you got to get to definition number 16 to say that that's when the MP sits and talks to his constituents." So I went out, and it was Cecil Parkinson. And so Cecil Parkinson, said, "Oh my gosh, listen to my story." He said, "Oh, they shouldn't have refused you. They should have given you an OBE." And so anyway, so by Monday, of course, I had all my papers. It's, of course, who you know, right? So I came in. I got my green card. That's a joke, because in the United States you get a green card, and this isn't a card, it's a book. But all the police registration and everything. And I started work at University Motors. I started writing. My first 2 articles were on the TD Mark II and MG Mudhill Madness. I wrote those for the New England MGT Registers publication, The Sacred Octagon. And the Mudhill Madness was about an MG car club meet, Black Horse Car Production Trials at Aldershot in October of 1971. I lived at Queensgate Place, Kensington. It was filled with foreigners at the time. I know the prices have gone up since then. Always had a typewriter. You can see the typewriter there, and it's an American flag. Always had an American flag hanging around someplace. That was while it was still popular. I took the Piccadilly line from Boston Manor, or from Gloucester Road out to Boston Manor, and picked up the E3 bus and drove up to 99 Boston Road, Hanwell, University Motors. So this is the big thing. Look at the marinas lined up there. Oh boy, wonder how many of those still. Where's the marina meet today? So,
well, you'd be surprised.
Hey,
same color as your cat.
So anyway, that was it. I mean, that was the largest MG dealership in the world, and the original Bradstock had a handshake deal with Kimber, and they got a cut on every car that was sold, every MG that was sold south of a line between Bristol and the Wash. So it was a huge operation. I went to your factors, bought all my Brit tools. I still have most of those spanners. And the only union, I'm a conservative. In the United States we call them libertarians. I mean, the extreme libertarians don't even believe in public schools. I'm not that far out, but anyway, this is the only union I ever joined. But I've got to find out if I subscribe to the pension plan at University Motors. So I lived in South Ken. I got the library card at South Ken. And I was, fully, here's my Umiko shopping card. I was fully engaged in British life as a foreigner. So here's an MGC. That's probably, maybe that's out in the car park. And then just to make my whole visit here even more exciting, somebody said, "Well, there's a guy down the road here with a TF behind his house." So I found the TF, and the owner said, "Mate, you fix it, you can drive it." So I drove a TF while I was in England working at University Motors. So here's my I always had that American flag hanging up there, looking pretty scruffy, but everybody else in the workshop looked pretty scruffy too. So my second work bay there. And here's the TF that I drove, parked outside Cornwall Gardens, which was my first flat. Cornwall Gardens was a fun place. My roommate was Swiss, And then, oh, here's my driver's license, you know, so I was fully involved here. I visited the MG company twice, but the one time I got a really thorough tour through the MG company by Phil Methifer. I wonder what happened to him. And here, you know, here's the gate 3 at Cemetery Road, and they wouldn't let me take my camera inside the plant for fear that I'd see people pushing cars along a concrete track that had been there since 1932. Anyway, so you know, here's the old sawtooth building, and the girls and everything, the special tuning truck that was parked outside. The powertrain deliveries, Abingdon was, as you know, it was an assembly plant. They didn't. Thornley said we didn't make anything. We only assembled. Here are some midgets waiting export. So it was just a thoroughly fun time. And I don't know. Is that White? Is that White? Maybe that's Ian's car. But it hasn't. The throttle cable isn't as long, and it hasn't got that piece of hose around it like yours does, Ian. But this is right at the factory. I don't know how I got a picture of that at the factory, because they wouldn't let me take pictures inside. So along Gloucester Road, you'd see, you know, that was back in the day when there were British cars on the road, and so here's a Costello, real early Costello car that I happened to hazard upon. And then there were other things too. Some kind of, I mean, the badge on it, if you blow it up, it says Jaguar on it. It's a bunch of unusual stuff, and minis and stuff all along. I visited Stonehenge before somebody spray painted "Free the Ponies" on one of the stones, and then they put the concertina wire around it, and then the glass. And now when you go to Stonehenge, you got to pay about 50 quid to get on a bus and drive for a kilometer to go, you know, go view it. But then, of course, you could get right up and climb, pick little pieces of the stone off and take them home. When I was living in South Ken, there's kite flying in Kensington Gardens. So there just lots of. That may have been my roommate there on the left taking a picture. Heinz was a pretty thin guy. And then there were the Spanish girls. So in the flat where I was, Heinz and I were there, and there were 3 Spanish girls, and all the Spanish girls knew other girls. So right away, we picked out our girls, and I said, well, that one's mine, and Heinz says, well, that one's mine, and his is the one in red here, and he's still married to her. That was mine. That was a 2-year quick marriage. Everyone should have a quick marriage that takes all fantasies of life and grinds it into the earth under their heel, you know. So here's the optional use of the SU-H4 carburetor. Back when, doing. So and then I got a competition license. I was going to put that TF out on the track. I didn't get it fixed up, but I did go to the Brands Hatch meet in the spring of '73. There were, you know, I mean, someone owns this car yet today. Jerry Brown and Ron Gammons were there, I'm sure, you know, campaigning cars and so forth. So here's the starting grid. It was just lots and lots of fun the whole time that I was here, doing all kinds of MG things as early as that. So Dick Knudsen, who's a MG, the MG guy in the United States for years, he ran the New England MGT register. I was in constant correspondence with him, and he said, well, find me a YB. So I found this nice YB for him, and then at the last minute he sort of backed out on the deal. I think I'd already put down 50 pounds. It was in exchange in Mart, nice looking YB, and a University Motors car, because it's got the UMG registration plate on it. So here's a picture of Dick Knudsen and me from American MG publication, and it says Dick Knudsen left and John Twist, 2 MG enthusiasts. Yep, you got that right. So I did buy a '57 Daimler Empress for my father. That thing was cool. That had a Wilson pre-selector and and Dr. Lanchester's fluid flywheel in it. That was quite a beast. Nylon tires, so you had to drive it for, I don't know, 5-10 miles before the thump came out of the flat spot on the tires. So I chased my Spanish girl down to Malaga, got married at Gibraltar, in the same room as John Lennon and Yoko Ono, but I got out of it with my life. Anyway, I came back to the United States, and I went to work for a couple of different places in rapid succession, including a Volkswagen place and parts. But I thought I'd pretty much filled up my fantasy of mechanicals, and then I thought, well, I'll do parts, and help me out. I mean, parts are parts. I mean, so Volkswagen part numbers are easier. 111s are all bugs. And anyway, I did that, and then they said, well, the guy came by and he says, well, do you want to run the body shop? And I thought, oh wow, yeah, sure. Well, that didn't work out well at all. The day he introduced me to the 3 body shop guys, they in unison quit. Something, I was just the pawn, just something else was going on. So anyway, that was the interlude, and then I said, screw this stuff, I'm just going to open my own MG shop. So this is the earliest days of my University Motors. I opened up in 25th of January 1975 in Grand Rapids. I bought a building, 3,500 square feet for $3,500 cash. It was in the depressed part of town, and I shared the shop with another guy that did Volvos. So I couldn't even afford the R in the motors. Things were pretty awful, but things after a bit, things got a little bit better here. I thought my MGA would run faster on a hill climb if I took the windscreen off, without realizing that could have poked my eye out, without and I'm sure it went no faster without the windscreen. But so then I met my real wife, long-term wife, Caroline. This was after I bought my Deluxe. So here's Caroline, myself, in one of my hairier stages. And we decided we'd get MG tattoos on our wrists. My late wife's was just as clear and distinct the day she died as it is here in this picture. Mine, you can't tell what it is. And we got them very, very small on our wrists because we thought, well, if tattoos fall out of fashion, who would have guessed? But if they fell out of fashion, we could always cover it with a wristwatch or something. Since then, of course, we've run into lots of other people with MG tattoos. There's an unnamed person with a multicolored tattoo. So here we are. By the summer of '79, I've got a bunch of people working for me. A bunch of them still own MGs. I'm the hairy guy. Obviously, they're on the left. And the shop started to look a whole lot better. I was able to afford to get the R back in the name. And so we had a nice time. We designed a logo based on the original University Motors logo. And then this is just before we got hoists in the shop. But it was always filled with MGs from here and there and everywhere. I had a good buddy who said, when you get a car from Kansas City, you'll know you've made it. Well, I had a car from Kansas City pretty quickly thereafter. I was able to pick up MG memorabilia, big old MG sign, and all kinds of stuff. Here I am with Frank Churchill. Frank and I corresponded while I was in England. He was the number 2 of the New England MGT register. So I bought him a set of rods from Toolman's and Isleworth from Dennis on the front counter. And then from 614 Eastern, we moved out to 6490 Fulton. That was a really nice place. That was 5,000 square feet. And here MGA is the one on the extreme left is like 10118 or 10117 or the 16th MGA ever made. Very different from mine, which is on the right, which is a 62. And one day I thought, well, we'll just pull the T-types out. These are all in for service. We'll just park the T-types in front. But unfortunately, way behind the tree, there over on the left-hand side, you can see a Sunbeam Alpine. So, it wasn't always working just on MGs. So this is my only air delivery. This fellow called me up and he said, "Do you have a valve cover gasket for an MGB?" And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, I'm giving a guy lessons on flying a helicopter. Can I land in your parking lot?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I ran out and gave him the valve cover gasket. And this is 1995, 1996, and it wasn't until last year that he paid me for that valve cover gasket. I ran into him at the Portland International All British Field Meet, and Eric, and he said, "Remember me? I'm the pilot." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "You never paid for that gasket, And so he bought me a beer, and we called it even. Here's my wife. She suffered lung cancer. This is after an operation. She's not looking so good here. This is up in the office. So then she passed away in January 2010. My son said, "Come on, Dad, let's go back into business. Let's buy a building." I was leasing that one. So I bought a building and we painted an MG on the roof. You can see that right there. Painted an MG on the roof. It's just so cool. But my attempt to go into business with my son was wholly unsuccessful, and after 6 months I had to fire his ass. It was just it was awful. It was just awful. And then I met another gal, and she said, "Oh, I can run your front office." And so I had her in my employ, married to her, and in my employ. And then one afternoon, my main man in the shop said, "It's either her or me." And I said, "Oh, Mikey, you're staying, because you're important here, and all she is trouble." So anyway, so here's my last building, my last shop, the Garage Mahal, and so we had just all kinds of. We had it was a half museum, half workshop. It was really nice, painted in brown and cream, just like it should be. And we always had lots of cars in there. We had an MGA police car. All the cars went out in the morning, and all the cars came in at night. I never left a car outside, ever, the whole time that I did once, and then that's why I always brought them in afterwards. And so it was like the running of the bulls, and so in the morning we'd start up all the cars and move them outside, and then I've still got my broom, great big broom, snow only for winter time, and you'd pull all the snow off the cars, and then we'd bring them in at night. So here they are jammed in the shop at night on Patterson Avenue, and you can see that we were working on it. We had a lot of stuff in process, working on cars. I wouldn't tell you that we got cars from every state and province, but we did have them shipped to us from Alaska and Hawaii. So long way away. How many customers did I have? Somebody said, "How many customers did you have?" I said, I don't know. So I pulled out a file drawer, and I counted the number of files, which each file is a car, and then multiplied it by the number of drawers. And it was like 5,000 different cars that we serviced over the time. And it wasn't just MGs. This is a 1929 sleeve valve Daimler V12 sleeve valve. The guy had taken the engine apart at the age of 70, and then at the age of 80, he came into the shop and he said, "I took this engine apart 10 years ago, and I'm 80 and I can't put it back together. Could you?" And I said, "Can you still write checks?" And he said, "Sure." And I said, "Then you'll drive it out, So, and we worked on minis. I mean, we don't have a lot of minis in the United States, but we worked on minis, and we did a lot of bench service. It did nice jobs, restoring carburetors and so forth. Here's one of my last summer party or birthday party reunions. My son on the extreme right. We get along just famously now. It was just real bad there for a short time. So, and we not only did service, but we also did summer parties. So Pete came to a summer party in '96. That was a smaller one. But at the peak, we had 3 different times. We had 550 MGs on the field, and every time we'd feature a different car, TC or the MGA twin cam, or we'd feature a car. But they were huge stuff. Then we did, starting in 1983, I did on-site technical seminars, and I've done those since. and moving them to off-site. Last week, what's today? Saturday? Last week, Saturday, I was in Daphne, Alabama, doing a tune-up seminar for 50 white-haired old guys, and all sitting around watching me tune up a couple of women, watching me tune up a 1965 MGB. So those are and I also do rolling tech sessions at the big MG meets throughout the United States. There's a couple of them. Our MG world is factionalized by models. So there's a MGA group and a T-type group and a B group. And I go to a couple of these meets per year and I do a rolling tech. So I've got a table set up with my tools. Next. And somebody rolls in and says, it's always the car doesn't run well. It's always that. But once in a blue moon, it's like my brake lights don't work. It's like, yes, something besides carburetors. So, done that. Off-site technical seminars. This is up at Mark Brandau's shop in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And showing it's spreading the word. So now I've done this. This is out of date now. I started doing YouTube videos in 1999. I now have about 450 YouTube videos up, and I've got 10.2 million views. So it's just and then 300,000 hours of people watching me. Imagine that. So. This is the formation of the North American MGB Register. I was the founding chairman of the MGB Register in the United States. So in 2017, Moss Motors underwrote the British Sports Car Hall of Fame, and I was an introductory member. My son on the right again, my girlfriend there, Mary, and so I was in the introductory class, recognized for my achievements in the United States. I drive a 62 Mark II Deluxe. I've had it since 1976. That's at the mint julep party that we had at my mother-in-law's house when they were out of town. Yep, that was still while we were all relatively sober. So. And there's my red octagon barn behind my old house. I had everything. You try to make everything octagonal. And here's my family. My daughter Mary, who's got a doctorate in chemistry and teaches around Chicago. Myself, my daughter Barbara, who lives in Los Angeles and drives a '73 BGT that I completely restored. My son James. My Army boy, my baby, he was in Afghanistan and came home with PTSD. He rejoined the Army Reserve on the fast track to becoming a high-level NCO, a Michigan State Trooper, married, 3 kids, put a gun to his head a couple of years ago. And then my son Brooks on the right. So that's it. I'm have tools, will travel. I had a guy call me last spring, and he's got 2 TDs, right? And he lives in Savannah, Georgia. And he goes, I go over a bump and and the front end's bouncing and making noise, and I'm trying to start to tell him how to do all this stuff, and then he's a heart surgeon. I said, well, I'm available, and so he said, well, how soon can you get here? So I do travel, and with my tools and so forth. So that's it. MG, the mark of friendship. So thank you very much. Oh no, this is there. I did bring along some little presents for the gentleman with the MGC special out in front and the ex-University Motors employees. I know you don't use tax stamps anymore, but there's the University Motors for your tax. Who are the University Motors guys?
Thank you.
For your tax stickers.
Thank you, John.
Whoop.
Colin Howder, he's got the University Motors special. So he should definitely have.
Thank you, John.
There we go. So, and I've got a couple more up here if I've missed somebody. And then,
Oh, lovely.
to put in your window, of course you can't see this. It says University Motors. It's got MG and a UM on it, but these are, you can put these in